Today we are reading Insignificant Events in the Life of a Cactus by Dusty Bowling, chapters 18 and 19. By late fall, the weather was finally starting to cool down to a comfortable temperature. I had read every single tarantula book from the Desert Ridge Middle School Library, the Phoenix Library, and the box we'd found in the storage shed. I now knew terrifying things about tarantulas, like that a type of wasp called a tarantula hawk would sting and paralyze a tarantula, then lay its egg on it and seal the tarantula up in a burrow. Once the wasp grub hatched, it would feed on the tarantula meat. Ugh! I couldn't wait to use that information to shock someone. I even blogged about it. I had written several more posts on my blog, mostly stuff about the park, school, tarantulas, and how I do things without arms. Pretty random stuff. So I called my blog Avon's Random Thoughts. Anyway, it wasn't about anything terribly exciting, but I had gained a few more followers. Zion now commented pretty regularly on my posts, and Emily still made her usual LOL and I miss you remarks from time to time, though I hadn't seen any comments from my other friends in Kansas for at least a week. Dad and I practiced soccer in the arena together early on weekend mornings when it was cool outside. It was wonderful to feel a chill in the air again, but every weekend I felt less and less enthusiastic about getting out of bed to go out there. I think Dad must have noticed my waning interest. He found an old tuba somewhere at the park, and he came into my room one morning, played horrible screeching sounds on the tuba, and then announced, "All hail Avon Laura Green, future queen of the Desert Ridge Middle School soccer team." I smothered my face with a pillow and told him there was no such thing as a queen in soccer. The next weekend, he played the tuba and announced, "All hail Avon Laura Green, future emperor of the Desert Ridge Middle School soccer team." And the weekend after that, "All hail Avon Laura Green, future world dictator of the Desert Ridge Middle School soccer team." Dad said the snakes would be hibernating now. So after we practiced soccer, I would hike up the hill behind Stagecoach Pass. I liked being able to look down on the park and the rest of the city, and I liked visiting my giant saguaro. I spent most of the time on the hill looking for tarantulas and collecting quartz rocks. I had quite the collection going on at home. I wore a loose, open bag around my neck so I could easily drop the rocks in with my toes. Most of the kids at school were now ignoring me completely. I guess they were used to seeing me around by now, so I wasn't getting any more shocked looks. It was more like I just didn't exist. I sat next to my giant saguaro, a while looking down at poor old Billy and Fred, endlessly hauling kids around the dirt trail. I thought it might be time for them to retire to the petting zoo. I wondered if we could replace them with a little train like one I had seen at the mall. Now that the weather was cooling down, business had picked up a bit, but my parents told me it was barely enough to keep the park running and cover all the repairs that were building up. I stood and walked around to the back side of the hill, hoping to find some new rocks. A strand of dark caught my eye. I slipped my foot out of my flat, grabbed it with my toes, and tried to pick it up. It was connected to something in the ground and wouldn't come loose. I put my flat back on and started kicking at the dirt, trying to unearth whatever was under there. Eventually, I loosened enough dirt to get the strand free. I laid it out on the ground and studied it. It was caked with dirt, but I could tell it had once been a necklace with a polished turquoise stone set in a dark metal. I lifted it with my toes and slipped it into my bag. I rushed home to call Connor and tell him what I'd found. After all, we'd seen that necklace before. Chapter 19. Connor, Zion, and I sat outside the lawn together before school, waiting for the first bell to ring. Connor studied the necklace while Zion flipped gently through the fragile sketchbook. Every now and then a brittle piece of paper would flake off, and we'd all gasp. Zion finally found the page that had the sketch of the necklace. "That's definitely it," he said. Connor held up the necklace. "The metal is nearly black, and in the sketch it's light gray." My mom told me that's because it's tarnished silver, I said. Look at the shape of the stone and that little vein running through it. It's definitely the same. But why was it up on the hill? Connor asked, then barked. I shrugged. I have no idea. Zion looked from me to Connor and back again, his huge eyes with alarm. What? I asked him. He covered his mouth and shook his head, like what he was thinking was too terrible to say. What? I said again. Dead body, Zion whispered. Connor and I looked at each other. I don't know, I said. What other explanation could there be? Said Zion. Someone murdered this necklace-wearing person and buried her body up on the hill? Why else would it be up there? Connor looked at me wide-eyed. Rodeo clown mafia? He said and snickered. I shook my head at him and tried to remain serious. I've spent a lot of time up on that hill, and I've never seen any sign of a grave or anything. It could have happened a long time ago, Zion said. Maybe bushes and cactuses and stuff have grown over it. I've heard a dead body makes good fertilizer. Connor and I laughed. That's so gross, I said. Where could you have possibly heard that? Zion scratched at his chin. I think I read it in a comic book. Oh, then it's definitely true, I said. Zion tore a handful of grass out of the ground and threw it at me. I shook my hair out. I guess there could be a dead body up there, but you'd think I'd feel all creepy when I was up there if there was. Like I'd feel a chill or a shudder or I thought for a moment, or a tremble. Connor smiled and barked. Then almost immediately we heard another bark from a nearby crowd. Connor's face dropped. I turned and glared at the group of kids standing near us. Several of them were covering their smiles with their hands as they snuck glances at us. I turned back to Connor. You shouldn't put up with that. Connor's shoulders slumped. What am I supposed to do about it? Normally, I would never want to call attention to myself, but there are times when my temper overwhelms my desire to go unnoticed. I stood up and shouted at the group, Whoever's doing that, it's not nice. You should be ashamed of yourself. I sat back down on the ground with a hump. Connor and Zion looked shocked at my behavior. There, I said, that's what you should do.